Before we get started, hit the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Whether you're catching sunrise in Nairobi, burning midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to hear from you. Don't just watch silently, let me know where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. Rain hammered the concrete outside Fort Covington's hangar, but the laughter inside was louder. Dozens of soldiers in fatigue stood in formation for morning inspection when a tiny woman, barely 5 feet 2 inches, stepped onto the platform in a plain green uniform with no visible rank. Sergeant Blake, towering over her, sneered loudly enough for the entire base to hear. "You're lost, sweetheart. The daycare's down the road." The men erupted in laughter, boots scraping the floor as they leaned to get a better look at her. Captain Riker didn't stop them, he smirked. "Just sign her in and send her to laundry duty," he ordered, tossing a clipboard at her feet. It hit her boot, paper scattering. No one bent to help her. She stood still, eyes steady, face blank, like humiliation had no power over her. But what shattered the room wasn't her silence, it was the fact that she slowly reached into her pocket. Soldiers leaned forward, expecting paperwork, maybe an ID. Instead, she pulled out a small black case embossed with a gold trident, the unmistakable symbol of the U.S. Navy SEALs. The laughing stopped instantly. Captain Riker stiffened. Sergeant Blake swallowed. She opened the case, and inside sat a polished rank insignia, the silver eagle of a full commander. Her voice didn't shake. "You don't tell me where I work," she said quietly, lifting the eagle with 2 fingers. "I tell you." Gasps rippled like wind through tall grass. Every man who laughed suddenly stood too straight, too fast. The base had just mocked a SEAL commander. Still, she didn't put the rank on her collar. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at them, one by one, making sure every face felt the weight of what they'd done. The silence was suffocating, but she didn't end it with anger. "Inspection continues," she said. "I wasn't late, you were loud." Instinct took over. Dozens of boots slammed together in perfect formation. The entire base now stood at attention for the tiny woman they had just humiliated. Riker tried to form words, but none came. Blake's jaw trembled. She hadn't even introduced herself, but everyone already knew. This wasn't just a SEAL, this was someone dangerous, someone they should have never underestimated. And one quiet thought hit every soldier at the same time. If this is the beginning, what happens next? Long before the laughter in the hangar, Commander Arya Hale stood alone on the deck of the USS Raven as the sun bled into the Pacific horizon. She wasn't wearing medals, ribbons, or even her uniform, just plain workout gear and dog tags she rarely touched. The ocean wind whipped through her short black hair, but her eyes stayed fixed on the water as if it held secrets. She remembered her transfer orders to Fort Covington, stamped classified, need to know only. It wasn't just another assignment. The Pentagon wanted her there quietly, without rank markings, without introductions. "Evaluate readiness," the orders read. But she knew the truth, leadership doubted the base. Someone wasn't doing their job. And she was sent to find out who. The memory of the last mission still clung to her like wet sand. Months earlier, in a hostage rescue op overseas, her unit infiltrated a cave system expecting 12 hostiles. There were 67. Radio comms failed. Backup never came. She gave the order that saved her team, but the decision cost her 4 soldiers, 4 names that still visited her in the dark when she closed her eyes. The youngest, Lopez, only 21, used to joke that Arya looked too tiny to be a SEAL. But he also said that when she gave orders, the world listened. She whispered his name under her breath every morning, a promise she wouldn't let another soldier down again. Not on her watch. Not ever. When she accepted the transfer, she could have arrived with full honors, ceremony, escorts, and insignias blazing. But she declined. She chose to walk in as nobody. No rank. No attention. No armor but silence. Because sometimes the real enemy wasn't out on a battlefield, it was inside the walls of the very bases they swore to protect. Jealousy. Laziness. Disrespect. Rot that started soft and spread wide. She had seen it before. Bases where recruits feared the wrong men, where discipline died slowly, where standards collapsed until someone was hurt, or worse. That was why she came. Not to be respected, not to be feared, but to see everything clearly. And she knew one thing with absolute certainty. If the men at Fort Covington laughed at her for being small, it meant they were used to kicking down instead of standing up. The perfect place for rot to hide. And she was ready to rip every layer open until the truth was exposed, no matter who she had to destroy to find it. The day after the humiliation, Arya walked the training grounds without a word about what happened. She still hadn't pinned her rank to her collar, and that alone rattled the base more than any punishment could. If she had stormed into the commander's office or written a report, they could have braced. But silence? Silence meant she was watching. Soldiers snapped to attention when she passed, but she didn't acknowledge them. She took notes. Names. Behavior. Weaknesses. Strengths. The ones who laughed yesterday now avoided her eyes, except two men leaning by the armory door. Sergeant Blake and Captain Riker. Blake muttered something under his breath and Riker smirked at it. They weren't afraid. They were angry, embarrassed, and now quietly vengeful. And Arya instantly recognized their type, the kind who protected privilege, not honor. She found the training logs inside the control room and flipped through digital reports. Instantly, patterns emerged. Failed drills signed off as passes. Safety lapses hidden. Ammunition shortages blamed on clerical error. And most alarming, inexperienced recruits being sent into live-fire courses too early. It was like the base looked strong on paper but was hollow inside. Someone was covering tracks. Someone was gambling with soldiers' lives. She printed 3 pages and slipped them into her pocket. When she exited the room, a figure waited outside, Private Torres, barely 20, boots loose, eyes full of fear. He opened his mouth and closed it again before whispering, "Ma'am, Commander, I didn't laugh yesterday." She didn't respond, only studied him. He swallowed. "They told us not to, they said if we respected you we'd pay for it." He didn't have to say who they were. Blake. Riker. Others who believed punishment kept them powerful. Torres stepped closer, voice shaking. "Please don't tell them I talked to you." Arya could see bruising on his ribs, fresh, deliberate. Someone had been teaching lessons through fists. She nodded once and walked away, though every step felt like dragging a weight through sand. The base wasn't full of bad men, just ruled by the wrong ones. Soldiers didn't follow Blake and Riker because they admired them, but because they feared the consequences of not obeying. As she crossed the courtyard, she stopped at a wall containing photos of soldiers lost in training accidents. She counted 6. 6 preventable deaths. And someone had buried them under paperwork. Blake and Riker weren't just bullies, they were dangerous. Men like that never laughed because something was funny. They laughed because they didn't think anyone could stop them. But for the first time in their careers, someone had arrived who could. Dinner in the mess hall was usually loud, metal trays clattering, voices echoing, boots dragging across concrete. But when Arya stepped inside, the room froze again. Not out of respect, out of fear of doing the wrong thing. She carried no rank on her collar, still pretending to be a nobody. Yet everyone had already heard whispers that she was a SEAL commander. Sergeant Blake sat at a table surrounded by loyalists, his voice intentionally louder than normal. "Some people think they're special because of the pretty gold badge they hide in their pocket," he said, not looking at her directly. The table laughed, too eager to impress him. Arya didn't react. She moved to the coffee machine, poured a cup, and began walking past his table. Blake shot out his leg, trying to trip her. He wanted another show. Another humiliation. But her foot stopped exactly 1 inch before contact, like she knew it was coming before his muscles even twitched. She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Didn't speak. She just looked down at his leg blocking her path, then lifted her eyes to meet his. Blake felt the room shift. This wasn't the silent patience of a victim. It was the controlled stillness of a predator. She moved his leg aside with her boot, not kicking, just pushing it away like it was weak. Quiet gasps rippled across nearby tables. Blake stood so fast his chair toppled over. "You want to do this now?" he barked, trying to regain control. Captain Riker stepped forward, trying to create a crowd effect. "She's nothing. She just got lucky. Probably slept her way into SEAL school." Blake smirked again. "Yeah, let's see how tough she is without a pocket badge." That was the moment the base expected Arya to break, shout, fight, defend herself. But she didn't. She placed her coffee cup on the nearest table very gently, and then said only one sentence. "If you lay a hand on me, Blake, you'll never walk again." The words weren't loud, but something in her tone, calm, factual, emotionless, made the back of Blake's neck sweat. So he overcompensated. He threw the first punch. It never landed. Arya moved so fast only the soldiers closest to the scene saw it clearly. One smooth step to the side, elbow hooked around his wrist, pivot, shoulder drop, and the giant man crashed to the floor with a sound that made every stomach tighten. Before he could even breathe, she pinned him using one knee and twisted his arm until the bone creaked. "Rules of engagement, Sergeant," she whispered, voice ice cold. "You struck a superior officer." Then she let go and stood. No punches. No rage. No screaming. Just absolute control. And when she stepped back, she didn't look at Blake, she looked at Riker. "You're next." The room fell so silent the lights hummed. Tonight wasn't the end of the conflict. It was the beginning of a war. Night settled over Fort Covington like a thick blanket of secrets. The mess hall incident spread across the base faster than wildfire, Blake humiliated, pinned, beaten without a single punch. But humiliation breeds hatred, not reflection. And Arya knew the quiet hours before dawn were the most dangerous. She walked the perimeter alone after midnight, boots silent, scanning the compound with the instincts of someone who'd survived too many ambushes to ever truly relax. The air smelled like rain and gun oil. Floodlights buzzed overhead. She paused when she saw 3 shadowed figures near the motor pool. They stiffened when they realized she'd spotted them, then scattered like spooked wolves. No faces, no names, just silhouettes and bad intentions. It wasn't fear that hit her then, it was confirmation. Blake and Riker were done embarrassing her publicly. Now they wanted something else. A warning, a punishment, a message. At 3:12 the first move came. A deafening explosion shook the barracks, sending soldiers scrambling from their beds. Smoke poured from the supply building, alarms blaring. Arya was first on scene, but instead of panic, she scanned for clues. The fire started at ground level, accelerant traces on the door frame, ignition charge planted. Not an accident. A distraction. And she was right. While firefighters rushed toward the flames, she sprinted to the armory, the true target. The electronic lock panel flickered, wires dangling from underneath. Somebody cut power. Someone planned to break in and steal weapons, then blame her for negligence or sabotage. Arya_disabled the manual override instantly, a code pattern known only by high-ranking SEAL intel. The system locked down tight, steel bars slamming into place. Whoever tried to get inside was now trapped. A muffled curse echoed through the hallway. She drew her sidearm, not out of panic but protocol, breathing steady as she stepped forward. The emergency lights flickered on, and staring at her through the steel cage was Captain Riker. He expected fear. He got disappointment. "You think you're saving this place?" he spat, pacing behind the bars like an animal. "You're destroying it. This base ran just fine until you walked in and threw your weight around." She kept her gun low, voice calm. "This base lost 6 soldiers because of you." His face twisted. "Not because of me, because sometimes weak men don't belong here. That's the job. Filter out the failures." She took one step closer, her shadow cutting across his. "You didn't filter them. You killed them." Silence. Real, heavy, suffocating truth. Riker slammed his hands against the bars, veins flaring in his neck. "You aren't here to fix things. You're here to take command. Replace us. Humiliate us." He wasn't just angry, he was terrified of losing control. Then he smiled, slow, cruel. "You can't win. Blake won't stop. And neither will I." Arya didn't threaten him back. She simply stared until his smile faded. Then she spoke 6 words that drained the blood from his face. "I'm not here to win. I'm here to expose." And with that, she turned away, unaware that this night's retaliation was only the first strike, and the next would be aimed straight at her heart. Arya barely slept that night, though the alarms had quieted and the fire crews had cleared the smoke. Every shadow in the empty hallways of Fort Covington felt alive, whispering threats she couldn't see. She replayed every encounter from the mess hall to the armory, each one a puzzle piece pointing toward something bigger. Someone high up was covering for Blake and Riker, someone who didn't want the base exposed. And she could feel it in the air, in the way soldiers avoided her eyes, in the tight silence in the corridors. Trust was thinner than a blade's edge, and Arya knew that even the smallest mistake could cost her everything. By morning she had tracked the subtle signs, shifted equipment, tampered logs, intercepted messages. Every small sabotage was intentional, precise, calculated by someone who knew exactly how she worked. She confronted Torres again, the young private who had risked telling her the truth. His hands shook as he handed her a slip of paper with a set of cryptic orders. One that instructed him to mislead her, delay her inspections, and subtly frame her for safety violations. The betrayal was unmistakable, and for the first time, Arya realized she had been walking blind into a trap. Someone inside the base wanted her to fail. Someone who knew her past and her reputation, someone powerful enough to stay hidden until the right moment. By noon, Arya found herself in the command office alone, studying the list of officers. Her pulse slowed as she examined each name, comparing patterns of negligence, absenteeism, and secrecy. And then she noticed it, the subtle alignment of reports, the timing of Blake and Riker's moves, the way they hid behind higher-ups. There was one name that kept appearing in every shadow of corruption: Lieutenant Colonel Anders, head of base operations, a man known for charm and precision. The realization hit her like a punch. The laughter, the sabotage, the fire, the failed inspections, all orchestrated. Anders wanted her gone, humiliated, or worse, discredited. And Arya Hale, tiny in frame but monumental in resolve, knew that to survive, she had to expose him without anyone realizing she had already seen through the veil. Every step from here forward had to be exact. A single miscalculation and this shadow war would end with her destroyed. But she didn't flinch. She had trained for the impossible, fought through betrayal and loss, and survived missions designed to kill her. Anders was about to learn the same truth. Some battles aren't won with brute force. They're won with patience, cunning, and the cold precision of someone who refuses to back down. Arya spent the next 48 hours moving like a ghost through Fort Covington. Every glance, every step, every conversation was calculated. She didn't speak unnecessarily. She didn't give anyone reason to suspect her plan. She carefully gathered evidence of Anders' manipulations: falsified reports, unauthorized orders, hidden weapon caches, and financial irregularities tied to contractors. She photographed, logged, and memorized everything, knowing that when the time came it had to be airtight. One misstep, one careless hint, and Anders would have her court-martialed or worse, removed from the base entirely. Late in the evening, Arya lured Blake and Riker into a training simulation, a setup she controlled completely. They expected an opportunity to humiliate her further. Instead, she orchestrated a series of exercises that exposed every flaw in their methods while simultaneously documenting their disobedience and sabotage. Soldiers watched in disbelief as the two men who had ruled through fear stumbled, panicked, and revealed their true incompetence under Arya's calm, commanding guidance. Even the young recruits whispered among themselves, exchanging glances that now held a glimmer of hope. Arya didn't raise her voice. She didn't shout. She simply let the truth play out, recorded in every movement, every failed maneuver, every whispered admission. Then came Anders. He arrived, confident, unchallenged, believing that Arya's tiny frame and hidden rank made her powerless. She greeted him in the armory, calmly but decisively closing the doors behind him. For a moment Anders smiled, smug, certain, untouchable. And then Arya dropped the final evidence on the table: surveillance clips of the sabotage, logs linking him to financial misappropriation, and audio of him ordering Blake and Riker to attack her covertly. Anders' eyes widened. His words stumbled. The room grew cold. He realized too late that he had underestimated her. One by one, the soldiers who had been silent before stepped forward, witnesses ready to corroborate. Arya's calm fury didn't need to scream, it didn't need to fight. The weight of undeniable truth pressed down on Anders, and in that moment, the tiny woman he had thought powerless was the one in control. The base was watching and everything had shifted. No one would ever underestimate her again. By sunrise, the mood at Fort Covington had shifted. Soldiers who once whispered behind Arya's back now watched her with quiet respect. Torres and a few other young recruits moved with newfound confidence, no longer afraid to speak when they saw injustice. Arya walked the parade grounds, her steps deliberate, surveying the men and women she had come to protect. The scars of negligence were still visible: worn boots, frayed uniforms, and the hollow look in the eyes of those who had endured Blake and Riker's tyranny. But for the first time she saw hope flickering in those same eyes. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence alone communicated authority, courage, and unwavering standards. Blake and Riker had been confined to the brig pending investigation. Anders' position was frozen by military police orders, his influence nullified. The base operated under temporary command, but Arya didn't seize power recklessly. She spoke to the soldiers individually, listening to their concerns, validating their fears, and quietly guiding them toward unity. For the first time, the base wasn't a collection of silos, rivalries, and fear. It was a team. Small victories, a drill done correctly, a trainee praised for skill, a report filed honestly, became the rhythm of life at Fort Covington. The soldiers realized that following Arya didn't mean obedience for fear of punishment. It meant respect for integrity. Late that afternoon, Arya stood on the balcony overlooking the training field. The sun cut sharp lines across the concrete, dust floating in the warm light. Soldiers ran drills with precision, boots hitting the ground in sync. Torres approached her quietly, a small smile on his face. "Ma'am, thank you for everything," he said. Arya didn't answer immediately. She simply watched the formation, the discipline, the commitment. And then she spoke softly so only he could hear, "Remember, Torres, courage isn't about size. It's about what you do when no one's looking." He nodded, understanding. The base had endured fear, sabotage, and betrayal. And now, under her guidance, it was learning something far more important: loyalty, honor, and the knowledge that no one, not even the smallest person in the room, could be underestimated. The wind carried the faint sound of boots striking the earth, a heartbeat for the reborn base, a rhythm Arya knew she had helped restore. It was late evening when Arya received the intelligence that Anders hadn't surrendered quietly. Despite the investigations and his temporary removal from command, he had rallied a few loyalists, planning to reclaim control of Fort Covington by force. Arya didn't panic. She walked the perimeter of the base under dim floodlights, checking security posts, ensuring every checkpoint was manned. The wind carried the smell of rain on concrete, the distant hum of generators, and the faint echo of boots on metal. She knew that tonight wasn't just about discipline or exposure, it was about survival. The tiny woman they had laughed at would now decide who lived and who fell. The attack came shortly after midnight. Anders' men moved under the cover of darkness, their footsteps quiet, weapons ready. But Arya anticipated every move. She and Torres, along with a handful of trusted soldiers, set traps, locked corridors, and created choke points. When the first shadows appeared near the armory, she was ready. Her team struck with precise coordination, a mix of skill, strategy, and flawless timing. Blake and Riker were caught in their own hesitation, forced to surrender when Arya's calm voice echoed, "Stand down. You have no advantage here. Not now. Not ever." The base, silent in tension, watched the drama unfold, every soldier frozen between fear and awe. Finally, Anders emerged, furious and desperate. His face twisted, eyes wide with disbelief. "You think a tiny woman like you can control this?" he shouted, stepping forward, fists clenched. Arya's eyes met his, unflinching. "I'm not controlling anyone," she said softly, deliberately, letting the weight of her words hang. "I'm giving them a chance to follow the right leader." Every soldier on the field took in her calm, the sheer authority in her stance. Anders lunged, but she sidestepped, disarmed him with a swift motion learned through years of combat, and held him at gunpoint. Silence fell like concrete. The base had witnessed betrayal, sabotage, and hubris crumble under one person's resolve. And in that moment, every soldier, from recruit to veteran, understood the truth. Underestimating her had been their gravest mistake. With Anders and his loyalists restrained, Fort Covington finally breathed. The tiny woman wasn't just a commander, she was the embodiment of discipline, courage, and unshakable authority. Dawn broke over Fort Covington like a promise. The rain had stopped, leaving the concrete glistening, reflecting the morning sun in sharp streaks. Soldiers moved through the courtyard with purpose, boots striking the ground in unison. Arya walked among them, still unpinned, still quiet, observing each face. She had restored order, exposed corruption, and neutralized threats. Yet she didn't demand gratitude or accolades, she simply ensured that the men and women of the base could do their jobs safely, with honor intact. Every soldier she passed instinctively straightened, not out of fear but out of genuine respect. Even Blake and Riker, now confined to strict supervision, met her gaze without defiance, a silent acknowledgement that she had bested them not just in skill but in integrity. The officers gathered in the command office as reports of Anders' capture and the exposed sabotage circulated. General Moreno, who had issued Arya's covert transfer orders, finally arrived, stepping quietly into the room. He surveyed the base through the wide glass windows behind her, taking in the soldiers drilling with newfound precision, the orderly stacks of equipment, the calm yet alert posture of every recruit. Then he turned to Arya. "Commander Hale," he said, his voice steady but tinged with awe, "the base is in your hands. You've done more than maintain order. You've changed everything." Arya nodded once, simple and measured. "The base doesn't belong to me," she said. "It belongs to the soldiers. I just made sure it could survive them and themselves." Moreno's eyes softened. He understood. True leadership didn't always wear medals or demand attention. Sometimes it moved quietly, like a tide reshaping the shore without anyone noticing until it had already happened. By midday, the courtyard was alive with activity. Drills, briefings, and laughter, the kind that didn't mock but celebrated shared accomplishment. Torres ran past Arya, a rifle slung over his shoulder, his posture confident, his eyes shining. "Ma'am," he called, saluting sharply. "Thank you." She returned a simple nod, watching him join the formation. Across the base, soldiers exchanged looks, sharing the unspoken realization: no one could underestimate Arya Hale. She was small in stature but monumental in courage. Every corner of Fort Covington, from the parade grounds to the barracks, now carried her mark: resilience, discipline, and unwavering integrity. And as she finally pinned her silver eagle insignia to her uniform, the base stood, boots on concrete, in perfect formation, not because she commanded it but because they chose to honor her. In that silent, radiant moment, the tiny woman became a legend. And Fort Covington would never forget the lesson she had taught: respect is earned, courage is measured by action, and no one, not even a single underestimated soul, is too small to change everything.